My name's Andrew Brady. My student number is 23447126, and this is my individual project part 2, where I do a comprehensive analysis of the SRS document, and I was part of Group O. Here's my table of contents, my introduction where I choose my stakeholder, and then I talk about how the SRS document can be referenced to my stakeholder, and then I reflect on working with my group and the SRS document. Here's my introduction. I basically just chose the software developer as my stakeholder, and I go into the reasons why, and I also let you know that I'll be doing a self-reflection later on. Here's a summary of our SRS document, and then we had to choose two models. The first one I chose was the use case model. Here's how the use case and model applies to the software developer. The use case helps the software developer understand how the system is meant to interact when the user interacts with it in different manners, and also it demonstrates the system boundaries, showing how the software developer should program the system, specifying what it should and shouldn't do in certain interactions with the user. There's also more reasons that I've listed. The second choice was the domain model, and here's how it also applies to the software developer. It helps the developers prepare for scalability and future maintenance when the system has more users on it at once, as it illustrates how many different kinds of the key entities are dependent on each other and how they are expected to interact. It will also ensure consistency across the whole system, as it must be aligned with this conceptual framework. This is a great indicator for the software developer, as it gives them an example of how both the application and web page should operate. And then here's some of the relevant requirements for the software developers. First is audio transcoding. This applies greatly to the software developer, as it highlights how they are expected to implement real-time audio transcoding based on the user's subscriptions. This means that they must implement efficient algorithms so the user does not have to wait for their audio to be recorded or played. I also have a recommendation system, and the software developer is expected to be able to create an accurate recommendation algorithm based on the user's search history data, what they've liked, and they must also be able to alter the program based on user feedback. Then here is also more relevant requirements to the software developer. Here's 3 questions I would like to clarify with the software developer. What security measures should be implemented to ensure user profile safety and password recovery? What data will the system base its recommendation algorithm off? And what encryption standards should be used to protect user data and make sure that they comply with GDPR? And then here's a critical self-reflection on my individual contribution to the SRS document. First I talk about my strengths and weaknesses, some of my strengths being organization, attention to detail, and then my weaknesses being my work becomes mechanical and there's unclear communication. Basically, the reason I chose organization was because I was very detailed and organized when it came to completing my work. I made sure to reflect on the work I had done with plenty of time and improve it. I was also able to help my group member finish off the goal model, as I had a prototype goal model made for her. But then I was also very unclear with my communication sometimes with my team members, leading to a lot of confusion. Some of the difficulties I faced when making the SRS document was the goal model description. One of the reasons I made that prototype was because I had no goal model to talk about, and I wanted to get my work done early. So I made a prototype and based my first draft off that, and then later went to improve it. And then another was time pressure, which kind of stemmed from my lack of clear communication for the non-functional requirements. Me and another team member ended up doing that together, and it led to confusion because I thought we were splitting up the requirements and constraints and doing half of each of them, whereas they thought that they were just doing either the requirements or the constraints, which meant I had to quickly do more work near the deadline. The most useful aspect of the SRS, in my opinion, was the goal model. It's one of the reasons I chose to do it in the first draft. And here are some of the reasons why, such as it clearly outlines what they should achieve and it demonstrates a hierarchy of the goals. Then here's what I would do differently. If I was to do the project again, I'd take on more responsibility. I wish I took on a greater workload during the project because I felt like I could have done a lot more for my group, and I thought my work was to a high enough standard. And if I was to do it again, I'd also delegate the workload differently, because in the first submission, I think we overestimated how much was needed for the goal model and how much was actually needed for the SRS. I feel like we needed more than one person adding all the stuff to the SRS and also writing everything in the SRS. And thank you for listening to my reflection and working with Group O.